Hello Math 8 students, this is Mr. Yoon here. I'm just making a YouTube video to go over the solutions from practice test number 2. Now I went over most of the questions in practice test number 1, and there is a key on PCR for practice test number 1, but I decided to make a video key for practice test number 2. Alright, so let's get started with question number 1. In question number 1 I have Miss Dixon, and she divides 5/8 pounds of candy amongst 3 friends. How much candy did each friend receive? Okay, so if Miss Dixon has 5/8 pounds of candy, and if she's going to divide that amongst 3 friends, then we would just take 5/8 and divide that by 3. Alright, so when we're dividing by 3, the 3 is the same thing as 3 divided by 1. And whenever we're dividing fractions, we can always change that division sign to multiplication, and all we have to do is flip the second fraction, so that will be 1/3. So 1/3 is the reciprocal of 3. And then we just copy down the 5/8, and all we do now is we just multiply the numerators and the denominators. So 5 times 1 is 5, and 8 times 3 is 24. So 5/24 is the answer for question number 1. And on your test, you would show similar steps just like this to get the full points. All right, let's move on to question number 2. In question number 2, I have Mr. Lamori, and he has 250 video games. And from those 250 video games, he actually bought 7 out of 10 of those games. And then the number of games Mr. McLean gave him is 3/5 of the number of games he bought. How many games did Mr. McLean give to Mr. Lamori? Okay, so let's just start with the number of video games in the problem. We have 250 video games. Alright, so 250 video games. Now, from the 250 video games, Mr. Lamori bought 7 out of 10. Okay, so he bought 7 out of 10 of those games himself. So if I look at the 250 again, from that 250, I want to know how many games did Mr. Lamori buy from that 250. So 7 out of 10 of those games are games that he bought. So we take our 250 and we simply times that by 7/10. All right, this will tell me how many games from 250 are games that Mr. Lamori had bought, because he has 7/10 of those games are his, or 7 out of 10 of those games out of 250 are games that he bought. Alright, so this is basically multiplying a number by a fraction. So all you want to do is take your number 250 and divide that by 1, and when we're multiplying fractions, we just multiply straight across the numerators and the denominators. But before you might do that, you might see that we might have some simplification going on. So I have a 10 here and a 250 there. So you can simplify those numbers there. 10 will go into itself 1 time, and 10 goes into 250 25 times. So this makes the calculations a little bit easier here. So if I take the 25 now and times that by 7, 25 times 7, that's going to be 175. And if I multiply the 1 here and the 1 here, 1 times 1 is simply going to be 1. So this is going to be 175 divided by 1. Or sorry, 175 divided by 1 is simply just going to be 175. Okay, so what that means is from the 250 games, there are 175 games that Mr. Lamori bought from himself. Okay, and then the question tells you that Mr. McLean gave him 3/5. So Mr. McLean gave him 3/5 of the number of games he bought. Well, we've got to ask ourselves, what is the number of games that he bought? Well, that's simply going to be 175. So he bought 175 games, and 3/5 of that number are the games that Mr. McLean gave him. So for this question now, all we do is we take our 175 and we times that by 3/5. So I'm going to redo that just underneath. So 175 times 3/5. And 175 is the same thing as 175 divided by 1. And then from here on, we just simply multiply the numerators and the denominators. But as you can see, we can do some simplification here. I have a 175 and a 5. So 175 divided by 5, we can definitely do some simplification there. 5 will go into itself 1 time, and 5 goes into 175 35 times. And 35 times 3 is going to be 105. and 1 times 1, that's simply going to be 1, giving you a final answer of 105 video games. Alright, so Mr. McLean gave Mr. Lamourie 105 video games. Okay, great. Alright, let's move on to question number 3. And on your real test, you'll definitely have a few questions where you have to add fractions, or you may have to multiply fractions, divide fractions, or subtract fractions. So these are some good questions that will definitely help you. Now, when you're adding fractions like in question 3a, what I like to do is I like to make one big line, and then from there on I just take my denominators, 4 and 3. 4 times 3 will be 12. And then I do this little crisscross method. 1 times 3, that's going to be 3. And 4 times 1 is going to be 4. And since I'm adding these, I simply put a plus there. So 3 plus 4 is 7, divided by 12, and that should be your final answer. And we can definitely use the same approach for question 3b. Let's just draw a line there. 5 times 3, that's going to be 15. And then 2 times 3 will be 6. 5 times 1 is 5. We add those. This will be 11 over 15. Okay. Now for question number C, you can do question C a few ways. One thing that you could do is you could change this to an improper fraction. Or you can simply you can add the smaller fractions, 5 and the 12 and the 3 and the 8. You can add those fractions and add that to this 1 right there. So I'm going to use the second method where I'm going to add those two outside fractions highlighted in yellow, and then I'll add that to my final answer of 1. So if I add these two fractions here, I will have a 1 on the outside, which is, okay, so there's this 1 right here. I'm going to move that over there. And then all I'm going to do next is I'm going to add my 5 over 12 plus 3 over 8. And once I get an answer here, I'm going to just take this answer and just add that to the 1 over there. So that's one idea. That's one way to solve this problem, and I think this method would be a little bit easier. Okay, so the question is, how do I add these two fractions, 5 over 12 plus 3 over 8? It's very similar to questions 3a and 3b. I'm going to draw a big line, and 12 times 8. 12 times 8, I believe, will be 96. And then you do 5 times 8, which is 40. And then you do 12 times 3, which will be 36. So 40 plus 36, that's going to be 76 divided by 96. All right, and if you take 76 and divide that by 96, you can definitely simplify that a little bit more. And if you simplify that, that's going to give you 19 over 24. Okay, so then what I like to do is I like to take this final simplified answer, and I will just tag that along to my final answer above. So this will be 1 and 19 over 24. So this is my final answer for question number C, 1 and 19 over 24. And you can definitely change that to an improper fraction, but I'm not going to in this video, so 1 over 19 and 24 is my final answer for that problem. But yeah, if you change to an improper fraction and if it's right, then I'll definitely mark it right on your test. Okay, so then we have question number 3D. It's a very similar problem to question number C. And what I'm going to do is, once again, I'm going to take these outside numbers, this 12 and the 3. And the problem for this question is we're subtracting now, so we just have to subtract our numbers this time. So let's just start with the outside numbers. 12 minus 3, that's going to be 9. And then after that, I will simply 8, and I'll subtract those. So I'll do that on the outside here. So 5 over 12 minus 3 over 8. Once again, I'm going to use one big line here. And 12 times 8, that's going to give me 96. 5 times 8, that's 40. 12 times 3, that's going to be 36, and this time I need a minus sign because I'm subtracting, and that's going to give me an answer of 4 divided by 96. 4 divided by 96, if you simplify that, that will give you an answer of 1 over 24. Okay, so I take my 1 over 24 and I just tag that along over here, so 9 and 1 over 24. Okay, so that's the answer for question number 3D. Alright, so I'm going to stop the video here, and in my next video I will continue on with questions 3E, F, G, and H.